This video is brought to you by channel partner 4 years running Squarespace. They just refreshed their already industry-leading website creation toolset, making it easier than ever before to build the perfect website for your business, your project, or just for fun. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
Atomfall is probably not what you think it is. If you've watched the trailers, like me, you might have been under the impression that this is basically British Fallout. And yeah, I mean, it certainly presents that way. It's a first-person game set in a post-apocalyptic world filled with survivor factions, bandits, retro-future robots, mutants, and ghouls, but with an English flair sprinkled on top. Sure, the Fallout London mod exists if you want that, but personally, as someone who's never really clicked with Bethesda's games, I was quite keen to see a different studio run with Bethesda's RPG blueprint and offer up their own take. But after 1.5 hours of hands-on time with Atomfall, I quickly realized that it's really not like that at all, and that's probably going to come as a surprise to you too if all you've seen are brief snippets of gameplay from trailers. Here's how the developers themselves describe Atomfall in a recent deep dive.
Our first-person action survival game launches on March 27th, built on 3 core pillars: mystery and investigation,
This land is not safe.
survival, brutal combat.
So yeah, those are the main pillars upon which this game is built. You'll notice there's no mention of branching consequences or character customization or world interactivity as core design tenets. It's helpful to remember that this is from Rebellion, the studio best known for their Sniper Elite series. Because yeah, I think this game bears a much closer resemblance to those games than anything else. It is not an open world game in the traditional sense. The story unfolds over these modestly sized, disconnected maps with room for some light exploration. And it places an emphasis on action, with surprisingly tight combat fundamentals. Like Sniper Elite, it's mostly unambitious in those aspects, but something that is pretty interesting here in Atomfall is its novel storytelling approach. It doesn't follow a linear main quest line, rather it invites investigation alone to drive the plot and exploration, with clues hidden around the world intended to sway your trust in the characters you meet. I wasn't able to gauge just how much these relationships meaningfully shape a playthrough based on my limited time with it, but the traces of it that I did get to experience do show promise. And that's important to note. I only had about 1.5 hours with this game, and that wasn't nearly enough time to come to a proper conclusion about whether it fully delivers on those core design pillars. My goal with this video is just to help you set the right expectations, because yeah, I think we're all guilty of tripping over our own expectations from time to time, and in that way, you might have been disappointed to learn that this isn't as expansive or sophisticated as you might have imagined. But if you are one of those people that enjoys a leaner experience, like those found in Rebellion's previous games, Atomfall might be up your alley.
Well, hello! A new face!
Atomfall is set in the 1960s, taking place after the Windscale Fire of 1957, one of the worst nuclear accidents in recorded history. Atomfall, though, presents an alternate history where that disaster has turned much of the northern English countryside into a quarantine zone, now patrolled by military forces, bandits, and unnatural creatures. It's a setting clearly inspired by the likes of Fallout and Stalker, but what helps it set it apart are the distinctly British details. You'll come across regular supplies of tea, the iconic red telephone boxes are somehow still around. The people you come across will yell at you for just looking at them funny. I mean, it's basically the same as modern day London.
Time to bleed.
In the preview, I was dropped a couple hours into the story, and at this point, my character's still getting his bearings. He's suffered from amnesia, with little recollection of how he ended up here. All he knows is that he needs to get the hell out of the quarantine zone. This journey began with me running into a group of cult members who appear to worship some entity birthed from the nuclear disaster. There was no negotiation here. The enemies in Atomfall are seemingly wired to attack on sight, and so it was here I got my first taste of combat. And combat is solid. I actually feel like it's a notable step up from Sniper Elite in this regard. For me, those games have felt kind of stuck in the past for a while now, with their animations and weapon handling, relying on a lot of the fun coming from the X-ray nutshots. Atomfall offers more of what you'd expect from a shooter from this era. Guns have a ton of kick to them, melee weapons feel especially weighty, and the way your enemies recoil and ragdoll to each hit provides some very satisfying feedback. Your combat repertoire also includes being able to fire a swift punch with with your offhand or smack them with the butt of your weapon. If you feel so inclined, you can even give your enemy a boot to the gonads to send them off balance. Kind of a dirty tactic to be sure, but anything goes in the wasteland. There's also a basic skill tree here with perks like making less sound during an assassination or gaining a melee damage buff after killing a melee enemy. It's, familiar stuff, bit reminiscent of the skill trees in stuff like Far Cry, but instead of gaining skills by leveling up, you find them out in the world in the form of training manuals. You also have the option of stealth. You can crouch in grass to stay hidden and sneak up behind enemies for a takedown, or take them out silently from range with a bow. That's about all the stealth sandbox offered in my preview. I didn't notice any environmental elements that could help me out. I couldn't throw anything as a distraction except for an explosive I found, but that isn't exactly quiet. It could very much just be the case of this being a preview build that takes place so early in the story though. It remains to be seen if the full game has more of that kind of thing to vary up your approach to encounters. What I did particularly like here is that they've leaned into a bit of realism to push that survivalist fantasy. There are no health bars here, but you don't need them since enemies don't have a lot of health, so you can trust that a single well-placed arrow to the dome is gonna take them out.
Trespasser!
By the same token, you're equally fragile. Just a few shots and you're out cold. This means you can be very easily overwhelmed if you find yourself out of healing consumables or ammo in the middle of a fight, which happened to be a number of times in this short demo, given how scarce these things are. I mean, ammo especially is particularly hard to come by. Bag space is also extremely limited, so every item is competing for a space in your inventory. It was a little Stalker-esque in that way, making the stealth approach always the preferred tactic to help you preserve those supplies for when shit really hits the fan. Exploration is one of the main areas that was a lot simpler than I expected. To be clear, Atomfall is not offering a rich, expansive open world experience like the trailers sort of have you imagine. The campaign seems to play out over a series of separate zones, each of them only taking like 5 to 10 minutes to run from one end to the other, with some sort of core objective to overcome before you move on to the next. Scattered throughout are a number of landmarks to loot, like abandoned towns or enemy camps, as well as dungeons of sorts that house some kind of puzzle. Like this one here, I found inside a bunker where I needed to avoid a patrolling robot and somehow get the power up and running to open a vault door. But despite the zone's compact scale, I didn't feel like there was much going on between these landmarks, which is a shame given how ripe this post-nuclear setting is for those spontaneous encounters or even just ambient world building stuff. I didn't come across any exciting loot either, which again could be a result of me being so early in the game, but I wouldn't expect much here given there's no real gear system, and the trailers don't show off any wacky improvised weaponry or anything like that. Exploration is required for that more investigative element of the game though. For example, that dungeon I mentioned with me needing to turn on the power, I was completely stumped. Straight up couldn't figure out the puzzle here. Right before my preview ended as well, I was desperately trying to find the key to open this final door of a cult base, and it didn't drop from any of the guards, but eventually I found a note outside the base from the key master who had scrawled some vague coordinates down that I had to manually pinpoint on the map. All that's to say that very little of this game is explicitly leading you by the hand. There's some really cool sleuthing required here, which in this day and age feels quite refreshing. Likewise, this investigation stuff is the driving force for the way that you progress the story. See, the conceit here is that there's no strict golden path. Rather, the game offers one broad mystery about the true nature of the nuclear disaster. How you piece this together is determined by your interactions with the main characters, which may be sort of influenced by the clues hidden around to sway your trust in them. This is the part of Atomfall that I was least able to fully grasp in this brief hands-on, but it's definitely the most promising aspect of the game for me. I did catch glimpses of this system in my preview. For example, my character seemed to be under an affliction causing him to hear voices, and I'd picked up a note that clued me in on a herbalist who lives at an old mine. So I head over there, hoping she might be able to help, and I'm greeted by this excitable old lady.
Don't mind me. Everybody knows Mother J go around here. I mean no harm. Folks that find their way to me are usually in need of something. What's on your mind, dear? Perhaps I can help.
Her warm British hospitality speaks to a kindly woman, so I get straight to the point. She can whisk up a tonic to ease the infection, but explains that a nearby cult has stolen the recipe, so I'd need to go fetch it from their camp. Additionally, she asked me to retrieve one of her herbalism books while I'm there, though tells me it's nothing worth killing over, which I thought was kind of interesting.
The Druids have something of mine, my herbalism book. I'd like it back. Nothing worth killing over, you understand? But I would like it back.
Now, I did have options to approach this conversation in different ways. I could press her for more information to figure out her true intentions, or proceed with wariness and turn her away entirely. Throughout my playthrough, I also came across things that made me question my trust in her, like on the way to that cult base, I was distracted by the ringing of one of those telephone booths, and on the other end was this mysterious voice warning me about her.
Do not trust Mother Drago. Mother Drago is compromised.
And then at the cult base itself, I also found a note suggesting that the members were actually wanting to collude with her for her supposed deeper connection to their strange deity. God damn it, should have learned my lesson from Baldur's Gate 3, you can never trust an old lady in the woods. So yeah, I definitely got the impression something sus was going on here, and I thought this was kind of cool. You know, the idea that a lot of the characters you meet might exist within a sort of grey area, that there is no reliable narrator, that various things you'll happen upon are going to try to sway your trust in one direction or another. I'm really keen to see how that all manifests, and if Rebellion are able to deliver on that sort of non-linear storytelling approach. And that concludes my short time with Atomfall. Again, I want to reiterate that this wasn't really enough time to understand the full breadth of these systems and whether they can sustain a full playthrough. What I do know now is that this is a much simpler game than I think many are expecting. It's more of an arcadey action game with light RPG elements, rather than trying to be a rich, deeply immersive RPG experience. Walking away from the preview, I certainly have much more measured expectations for Atomfall now, but I'm still keen to see how the full game pans out, given its solid combat fundamentals and interesting narrative structure. Like I said in the intro, this has a very similar feel to Rebellion's previous games, in its trimmed back, focused design, kind of reminiscent of the games that we got back in the Xbox 360 era. Something that's fundamentally quite simple, but has some promising ideas. If you're into that, then Atomfall might be worth keeping an eye on. You can likely expect a full review around its release on March 27th.
A lot of people ask me how to break into the games media business. There are plenty of ways to do it, to be honest, but for me, I like to write. I like to write my scripts. I very rarely do anything off the cuff. Writing gives me the time to think things through and make sure I actually say what I mean to say. If that's something that appeals to you too, then I really think having a place where you can write and publish your work is super helpful. And if you want to create a space like that for yourself, then consider doing it with this video's sponsor, Squarespace. For years now, Squarespace have been the very best in the website creation business. Their tools are second to none, making it super easy to create a website no matter your experience building websites. You could be a total beginner, and Squarespace's tools will let you build a professional looking website in mere minutes. The ease of their tools lets you focus on what matters most, your writing. You can write with the confidence that when it's time to publish, the process will be simple and will always look great. Squarespace isn't just about the front-end experience though, it's also got all the back-end stuff you need to make sure your website is surfaced in search. Every Squarespace website supports sophisticated SEO tools that are just as easy to use as everything else Squarespace offers, meaning you can be sure that the customers who are looking for you can find you. There's so much more that Squarespace offers, so if you'd like to check it out for yourself, you can visit squarespace.com to try it for free. And if you want to get serious, visit squarespace.com/skillup to get 10% off your purchase of a website or a domain name. A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.